The van was on the shoulder with its hazard lights on. I passed it once. When I saw it again 10 minutes later, I knew something was wrong. I was driving eastbound on I-40 through New Mexico, running a night haul with dry freight. Nothing urgent, nothing unusual. Just another overnight run where the road stretches out forever and the radio fades in and out of static. I remember the time because I just checked my logbook. A little after 1:10 a.m. The van was a white cargo model, older, no logos, no plates I could see from the lane. Hazard lights blinking, but not evenly. One side flashed slower than the other. It sat a little too far off the shoulder, angled like it hadn't been pulled over carefully. I noticed it, registered it, and kept going. You don't stop on empty highways unless you have no choice. Every trucker knows that. About 10 minutes later, I saw headlights ahead again. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but as I got closer, my stomach turned when I realized it was the same van. Same uneven hazards, same angle on the shoulder, same stretch of empty desert. That's when I slowed down. There's no logical reason a disabled vehicle should appear twice ahead of you on a straight highway with no exits in between. Either I was mistaken, or something wasn't adding up. I checked my mirrors. No U-turns, no side roads, no ramps. As I passed it the second time, I noticed something new. The rear doors were slightly open. Not wide, just enough for darkness to spill out in a way that didn't look right. I told myself it was coincidence. Fatigue does strange things. I kept driving. Another 5 minutes passed. Then my headlights caught reflective tape ahead again. Same van. This time my hands tightened on the wheel. There was no doubt anymore. The van hadn't moved. I had. I pulled into the left lane and passed slowly, watching it carefully. The hazard lights were still flashing, but now the driver's side door was open. No one stood beside it. No one waved for help. The interior looked empty. That's when I noticed the road was dead quiet. No other trucks, no cars, no radio chatter. Just my engine and that van. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down after that. I pushed my speed higher than I should have and didn't ease off until I reached the next truck stop almost 30 miles down the road. I parked, shut the engine down, and sat there longer than necessary. I considered calling it in, but what would I say? That I passed a van that looked strange? That it appeared multiple times? There was no proof, just a feeling. I went inside, got coffee, and stayed until I felt steady enough to drive again. An hour later, I was back on the road. About 15 miles ahead, traffic slowed to a crawl. State troopers had blocked off the right lane. Flares burned along the shoulder. A tow truck sat crooked near the guardrail. And there it was, the white cargo van. Rear doors wide open now. From my cab, I could see inside. The cargo area wasn't empty. There were ropes bolted into the metal walls, straps, stained blankets piled in the corner. A trooper stood nearby, talking into his radio. Another officer leaned into the back of the van, then straightened up quickly and walked away. As I rolled past, one of them looked up at my truck and held my gaze longer than normal. I delivered my load and tried to forget about it. 2 days later, a state trooper called my company asking for drivers who had been on that stretch of I-40 overnight. My dispatcher gave them my name. They interviewed me over the phone first, then asked me to come in. That's when I learned the truth. The van had been reported in connection with multiple disappearances along the interstate, mostly hitchhikers, a few stranded motorists, one runaway teenager. The driver would pull over, pretend to be broken down, and wait. If no one stopped, he moved the van forward using service roads and emergency turnarounds, resetting the scene farther down the highway. Over and over. He'd been doing it for years. The reason I saw the van 3 times wasn't because it followed me. It was because I kept passing his trap. They told me he had been arrested less than an hour after I last passed him. A trucker behind me had stopped to help. That driver never made it back to his cab. The trooper asked me why I hadn't stopped. I told him the truth. Something didn't feel right. Before the call ended, he said something that still stays with me. "You're the only driver who reported seeing the van more than once. I don't stop on the highway anymore. If I see hazards on the shoulder at night, I keep moving. Some people don't need help. They're waiting."
I've driven enough rural highways to know that detours aren't suggestions. When a road is closed out in the middle of nowhere, it usually means something serious happened. This took place in western Pennsylvania on a 2-lane state route I'd driven dozens of times. I was heading home late after visiting family, not rushing, not tired enough to make careless decisions. Around 11:30 p.m., I saw orange cones blocking the road ahead. A temporary sign read, "Road closed, local traffic only." There were no construction vehicles, no workers, just cones and the sign illuminated by my headlights. I slowed and looked for a patrol car. There wasn't one. To the right, another sign pointed down a narrow road I didn't recognize. Detour. I followed it. The road immediately changed. Pavement turned rough, no center line, trees closing in on both sides. My phone lost signal within minutes. After about 5 minutes, I passed what looked like an abandoned house set far back from the road. No lights, windows boarded unevenly. A truck sat in the yard with no tires. That's when I noticed the cones again. Same kind, same spacing. They were guiding me forward. I kept going, telling myself it was temporary road work, but the road didn't lead back toward the highway. It narrowed further, dipping into a wooded hollow. Then I saw a pickup truck parked sideways across the road. 2 men stood beside it, not wearing reflective vests, not holding flashlights, just standing there, watching. I stopped well short of them and cracked my window just enough to speak. They didn't move closer. One of them raised his hand and told me the bridge ahead was out, said I needed to turn around. I asked why there were cones if the road was closed. He ignored the question. Instead, he told me to step out so he could show me where to turn around safely. That's when I noticed the pickup's bed. It was lined with a blue tarp. Rope lay coiled on top of it. I told him I'd turn around on my own. He shook his head slowly. "Not enough room," he said. "We'll guide you." The other man moved behind my car. I put it in reverse immediately and backed up as fast as the narrow road allowed. One of them shouted. The pickup's engine turned over. I swung the car into a ditch just enough to turn around, scraping the underside, and took off the way I'd come. I didn't stop until I reached the main highway again. The next day, I called state police. They already knew. That detour wasn't official. Someone had stolen cones from a nearby construction site and placed the sign themselves. 2 men had been stopping cars late at night for weeks. 3 people were still missing. Police believed the men used the detour to funnel drivers into an area where no one would hear them scream. They never caught them. The cones were gone the next time I drove through. So was the detour sign. But I don't follow late-night road closures anymore unless I see a marked patrol car. Some detours aren't meant to protect you. They're meant to isolate you.
I was driving a refrigerated load from Ohio to Michigan. It was a routine night run, nothing unusual, except I had been on the road for over 12 hours and needed a short break. I wasn't tired enough to sleep, but my body was aching for some movement. That's when I decided to pull into a small truck stop I had never used before. It was the kind of place that looks fine from the highway, a single pump island, a diner, a few parked rigs, but as soon as I entered the parking lot, something felt off. The lights were on, but they were dim, flickering in a way that made the shadows in the corners stretch unnaturally. No other drivers were visible outside their trucks. I parked, stretched, and walked toward the diner entrance. The door was propped open, and the smell of greasy food hit me. But it wasn't the usual truck stop aroma. It had an acrid chemical edge I couldn't place. The interior was almost empty, except for a man at the counter. He looked normal at first glance, mid-40s, scruffy hair, wearing a faded apron. But his eyes, they never looked directly at me. They darted past me, constantly scanning the shadows behind the walls. I ordered coffee and a sandwich. The man nodded silently and shuffled back behind the counter. No greeting, no acknowledgement. I noticed a security camera above the register, angled toward the counter, but the lens was missing, just the casing. I took my food to a table in the corner, away from the counter. I ate quickly, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. That's when I heard it coming from the back of the diner. Slow, deliberate, like someone moving across the linoleum. I glanced toward the door behind the counter. No one came out. The taps continued, echoing slightly, then stopped as suddenly as they began. I decided I had enough. I paid, stepped outside, and noticed my rig across the lot. The cab door was slightly ajar. I hadn't left it unlocked, but the handle was hanging down like someone had tried it. I walked faster, reached the cab, locked the door, climbed in, and started the engine. That's when I realized my tires were wet. Not from the dew, not from a puddle. Someone had poured water around the truck in a precise circle. My first thought was pranksters, but who would come to a nearly empty truck stop at 2 a.m. carrying buckets just to scare one driver? I didn't wait to figure it out. I pulled out, scanning the lot. The diner was empty again, the lights flickering as if no one had been inside at all. The pumps were silent, no movement. When I reached the highway again, I saw a small sign I hadn't noticed before. Closed for renovation, no overnight parking. That diner wasn't supposed to be open at all. I called my dispatcher the next morning. They told me a delivery truck driver had reported a similar experience there 2 months prior. No one ever stayed overnight at that location. Some suspected the diner had been used as a front for robbery or worse, preying on drivers who stopped during night runs. I never stopped there again. Even now, whenever I see a small, quiet truck stop at night, I remind myself, some places aren't meant to give you rest. Sometimes the people who run them are waiting for someone willing to step inside.
I was driving my rig east on I-70 through Ohio, doing a standard overnight run. It was dead quiet. No cars, no trucks, just endless asphalt under the cold glow of the highway lights. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something unusual. The lane ahead was blocked by a fallen tree. Not small branches, a full tree, blocking both lanes. I slammed the brakes and stopped about 20 feet away. My headlights lit up the scene. At first, I thought it must have fallen recently, maybe from a storm, but the branches didn't look torn. They had been cut clean, almost deliberately. Then I noticed a man standing on the shoulder, wearing dark clothes and a hood. No flashlight, no reflective gear, just standing and staring. I figured he was either going to help me or cause trouble. I stayed in the cab, locked the doors, and honked twice. He didn't react. Instead, he raised one hand and gestured for me to drive around the tree, toward the grass on the shoulder. That's when I noticed more figures. 4 or 5 men appeared from the woods, slowly walking toward the road, carrying long poles and what looked like chains. At that moment, I realized this wasn't an accident or a random stranded driver. This was a trap. I backed my truck carefully, eyes on the mirrors, trying to get some distance. One of the men waved as if to block my exit, but the others moved into the tree line and disappeared. I had to think fast. The shoulder was muddy, but it was the only way. I drove off-road, scraping along the embankment, and managed to get back onto the highway. My heart was pounding like never before. The next morning, I called the state police to report the incident. They said I wasn't the first. Local drivers had mentioned seeing strange men blocking roads overnight, cutting trees across lanes, and creating false accidents to trap drivers. Some of them never reported it. One trucker had been robbed after stopping in a similar setup. I've driven that stretch dozens of times since, but I never slow down if something is on the road at night. You never know if someone is really stranded or just waiting to take advantage. Some stretches of highway aren't dangerous because of the road itself. They're dangerous because of the people who control it after dark.
I was driving a flatbed truck east on I-70 in Ohio, a night run with minimal traffic. Around 1:45 a.m., I noticed the signs for an old bridge over a creek. I had crossed it dozens of times during the day. It was narrow, a single lane each way, with guardrails that had clearly been patched over the years. That night, something about it felt off. The road leading up to the bridge was clear. I eased onto the lane and noticed that the surface of the bridge looked uneven, like someone had been tampering with it. Then I saw them. A pair of men standing near the far side, leaning against the guardrail. At first, I thought it was construction workers, but there were no lights, no cones, no equipment, just them, quietly standing in the dark. One held a flashlight pointed toward the water below. The other leaned casually, but his posture suggested he was waiting for something. I slowed the truck and checked the mirrors. No vehicles behind me, no one else on the bridge. My gut told me to keep moving, but I felt my body tense. As I crossed, one of the men stepped forward into the lane. Not running, not waving, just blocking. My first instinct was to swerve, but the bridge was narrow.
There was barely enough room on the shoulder. The man didn't speak, he just watched. His companion stayed near the guardrail. I realized they weren't just standing there, they were observing me. I decided not to stop. I shifted gears carefully, keeping my distance from him. The truck jolted slightly as I passed a section of the deck that looked like it had been tampered with. A loose plank or a piece of debris. It hit the undercarriage, but I kept going. Once I was halfway across, the man stepped aside. I drove onto solid asphalt beyond the bridge, but the feeling didn't leave me. I checked the rearview mirror. He was standing there, arms folded, just watching me leave. A few miles down the road, I stopped at a rest area and called my dispatcher. I explained what had happened, and he immediately put me in touch with some other drivers who frequented that stretch. They told me stories of strange encounters on that bridge, people lurking, debris being left on the road, drivers forced to slow down or swerve, and occasional reports of trucks being targeted for theft. According to my haulage company, several truckers had flagged the bridge as dangerous at night, and dispatchers had been warning drivers to take alternate routes. The company had even mapped out safer detours for night runs based on information collected from experienced drivers. It was unnerving to realize that the danger wasn't new. It had been going on for months, maybe longer, and the people responsible were still out there, waiting patiently for drivers to cross the bridge after dark. I never crossed that bridge at night again. When I drive east on that stretch of I-70 now, I take the next exit and follow a safer route. Some stretches of highway aren't dangerous because of traffic, not because of weather, but because drivers with ill intent have chosen them as hunting grounds, and they watch, quietly, waiting for anyone who doesn't know the rules.